back to Winning Isn't Easy. Why you shouldn't track your symptoms in a chronic fatigue or long-term disability claim. Now, I am sometimes equivocal about whether we should do this or not. You have the burden to prove that you're disabled, as that term is defined in your disability policy or plan. And one of the things that disability carriers generally demand is objective evidence of your restrictions and limitations. So the issue becomes, what are your symptoms? How do those symptoms impact your ability to perform the material and substantial duties of your own occupation or any occupation? Now, that can be hard to do without a functional capacity evaluation or a CPET test. And I think that one of the most important tools that you can use to help quantify your symptoms and the impact of your chronic fatigue symptoms is a diary in the right circumstances. Now, in the right circumstances, the diary will help your doctor render an opinion about your restrictions and limitations that prevent you from performing your own or any occupation. In other words, it's going to explain the nature of your symptoms, how those symptoms impact your ability to work, and will document relapses, your response to treatment. However, you might be tempted to supplement this on a daily basis and submit this whole chart as to why you can't work a full day of work or a full week of work. And I think that's a bad idea. It's a bad idea in that if you say the wrong thing, if you're tracking your symptoms on a daily basis, they may wax or wane depending on your activity. That may not necessarily be consistent with what you're reporting on the activity of daily living forms that you're giving, and it certainly may not be consistent with what your doctor is reporting. So my problem with keeping at least daily logs is the problem that you have with consistency. But I think that there is another problem, and that is disability carriers will tend to use surveillance, and they will take that daily log sheet and they will try to put surveillance on you. And you might have a good day and you might have a bad day. You might have a cluster of bad days, but they may correlate your daily log sheet with that surveillance that they have. So it's a golden opportunity for them to assign surveillance. And generally what they'll do after they've done that is they'll take your statement and they will point out to you inconsistencies between your activity of daily living forms, the logs that you have kept, and what your doctors had to say. So I don't necessarily like daily logs. If you're going to do a log, I would prefer that you do a log on a weekly basis. But what's important about that, I think, ultimately, is that needs to be correlated on an objective basis with the diagnosis and the restrictions and limitations. And in chronic fatigue cases, I think that having a functional capacity evaluation or a CPET exam is the stronger way to document your restrictions and have them sort of be consistent, if you will, cooperative of your own report. Now, why is that important? Because many times disability carriers will take your daily log, surveillance that they have, and say to the doctor, look, she said that she couldn't do that, but here's film of her doing that type of activity. She said that she had good days or bad days, but here's, running days of her of doing all sorts of this activity that's not consistent with good days or bad days. And what she told you, doctor, about what she could or couldn't do is not necessarily consistent with that log. So, doctor, taking all of that into consideration, don't you think you're relying on the patient's subjective complaints? And don't you think that they can actually do more, particularly since we've got film that's inconsistent? Obviously, doctors don't want to be put in this type of situation, and more likely than not in that situation are likely to say, well, I agree with you. I was wrong. I relied on their subjective complaints. Now, of course, if there's strong physical evidence on examination that's consistent with the diagnosis, then carefully complete the log, be consistent, expect potentially that you're going to get surveillance, but again, be thoughtful about keeping that daily log. As I said, I would prefer at best a weekly log, and I would actually really prefer a CPET or a functional capacity examination. All of this is factually dependent and case dependent. And that's why I sometimes hesitate about diaries, not doing diaries, what you should do, because I think it's on a case-by-case basis. And when I have a claim that's been denied or terminated, We're talking about the log, keeping a log. If I represent somebody at the early stages of the case or they're on claim, we have that discussion about keeping a log. Should I? What should I do? That sort of stuff. So I'm sorry I can't give you, a strong answer about keeping a diary, but you've got the benefit of my thoughts. And again, case by case basis. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Winning Isn't Easy. And I would love it if you went and left a review, that you liked our page, that you share it with family or friends, and that you subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to talking with you in our next insightful episode of Winning Isn't Easy. Thanks.